All right, perfect. Um, my name is Fawad Qamar. This is Mike Walsh. I'm a real estate agent who works within Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And Mike has been nice enough to give me some time to talk about inspections, which are really important for both buyers and sellers. Um,
Absolutely.
so Mike, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you, your company, when it
Okay.
started up and everything.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
My name is Mike Walsh. I am a licensed home inspector in the state of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. I've been doing home inspections full time since 2003. I started my company in 2008, and over the years, we've grown it now. We have there's 3 full-time inspectors, a couple part-time inspectors, and some office staff. So to kind of help us cover all of the territory that we go through. And yeah, that is us.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I found your company to be really helpful. I've used other inspectors previously as well. And what I've found the real difference between you and other inspectors that I've used is the educational aspect. I've had many buyers who have come through and have been well educated about, especially like maintenance and how to be able to run their house afterwards. What and sometimes I give pointers, but most of the time I don't have to do much because of the way that the inspection is conducted from the exterior to the interior, floor by floor, and the report that comes in later on. They also have talk about some energy aspects, which I don't find a lot of people do, about like Mass Save and other types of programs in Rhode Island as well. So.
Yeah, so like when I started my company, I had previously worked for another company, and they did a nice job doing home inspections, but you got there, you did your job, you told people what they had, and you left. When I did it, I wanted to kind of set my company apart a little bit and get into the educational aspect of it and kind of teach things to people versus just talk to people. I've found over the years, people become more involved and retain a whole lot more if you're actually teaching them what things are versus saying, all right, this is your heating system. If I explain what the heating system is, how the heating system works, and just basic simple things that they can kind of keep an eye on to see if there is any potential issues happening with it in between servicing all of that, kind of gives them that confidence level that they know what they're doing with their house. So we want to try to just walk them through all aspects, whether it's maintaining the exterior of the house, their heating and cooling systems, what to look for their plumbing, electrical issues, and all of the interior living space stuff. So we tried to hone our our presentation, I guess, of the inspection to that to teach people about the house. And along with that, as you said, we provide a very detailed report that pretty much mimics anything that we talk about, goes into the report with pictures and guidance and suggestions and recommendations for even just good maintenance on a house that doesn't have many issues at all. We're still going to give all kinds of good maintenance issues and items that they can kind of do to kind of keep the house in the condition it should be in.
Yeah, so let's lead off from that, because your inspectors seem to do that consistently. I've used different ones. What do you do with them when they come on board, or if they've been doing it for a while? Is there like continuous education for them, or is there like there's a mindset that you've trained them with, which helps them to do something like that every time?
So I try, whenever I take a new inspector on, I try to take somebody that hasn't been in the industry before. And that way I can teach them to do the inspection the way I want them to do it. Most all of everybody that I've had working for me in the past has had some sort of construction knowledge or hands in it, whether it had been electrical or framing or flooring on that end of things. But I would prefer to teach them how I want it done, and that way they don't know any different. So that's kind of how they do their inspections, and they kind of carry on in the footsteps of how I want it, versus trying to knock down how somebody else taught them to do it and then build it back up to the way that they should do it. So it's good to hear that everybody is nice and consistent in doing it the way that I want them to.
That's really, really interesting. I've never heard that before. That's actually like sounds counterintuitive, but it seems to have worked out really well for you. You can see it in practice.
Yeah, I've had one of my best friends growing up. Has been a contractor for now 40 years, and he is spectacular at what he does. He tried being a home inspector for me, and he just couldn't take off that contractor hat, and I just had to get rid of him because he had this thing built into his head that this is how I need to do it, and it wasn't how I wanted it done. So it didn't work out too well. Yeah.
Got it.
So it's easier to build up versus have to take something and knock it down and then rebuild it back up.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Could you tell us shortly what's your process of doing an inspection? For example, the inspector shows up to a property. What should a buyer expect from somebody like even a seller? Because some people do
Yeah,
inspections.
absolutely. So buyer seller, we try to get to the inspection a good half hour before the time the inspection's supposed to start. So for the sellers, it's great to know that we're going to show up there early. So if it's a 9 o'clock inspection, we're going to be there 8:20, 8:30, something like that. And if you're the buyer, it's good to just know we're going to get there early. But that time, 8:30 to 9, we kind of want the house to ourselves. We want to be able to walk around the exterior of it and really kind of poke and prod and look at everything. Within that time period, we can pretty much size up the exterior of the house. And then when the buyer gets there, then we can kind of just jump right into the inspection process. I can walk them through and kind of give them the recap. That way, I don't get pulled into too many different directions and kind of miss something. Exterior of the house is a huge portion of it. And if I've got somebody on my shoulder asking me a ton of questions when I'm trying to do my initial evaluation, it's a good chance I could miss something. But if I've already done my initial evaluation and I'm now walking the client around and explaining everything to them, if they've got questions and they want to pull me in different directions, that's fine because I've already know what I need to see and what I want to point out to them. So that's kind of one of the biggest things is just knowing that we're going to get there a little bit early and that we actually do prefer that time to be by ourselves. So if we, you see that we're going to get there at 8:30, please don't show up at 8:30, wait till 9 o'clock. And then when you get there, we're going to jump right into it. And, you're not going to miss anything. You're just going to make sure that we don't miss anything.
Yeah. And then what happens next right after that?
So once they get there, we usually just kind of go over the process of what the inspection is and how we go through it. And as I always explain to people, kind of a home inspection with us is like going to your primary care physician for a physical. We're going to inspect everything top to bottom and inside and out. But if we find an issue, we're going to send you to a specialist. And that's pretty much what we do. So when you get there for the inspection, we're going to start discussing the house on the exterior from the chimney down to the foundation, its age, its condition, anything that needs to be done to get it back into a better position or to where it should be, and then go over, even if it's in great shape, we go over the proper maintenance things that they want to do in order to maintain the house the way that it should be. Once we get done with the exterior of the house, and we make sure, I've trained my guys all along the process to ask repeatedly as we go through, do you understand? Do you have any questions? We want to make sure that, if we're explaining something to somebody, they get it. If they don't get it, we've been doing this for so long, we can explain it 50 different ways. One of the ways they're going to get. So we do that, the exterior, and then we go from there down into the basement. And then we usually like to go with the mechanics first. So we usually start with the heating and the cooling system if it's present, supply plumbing, waste plumbing. Then we get into the electrical, pull off the service panel cover, take a look at the wiring, and then we get into the structural aspects of the basement. Anything that's exposed, we'll poke and prod. We'll look for signs of water or for bugs or for rot or damage or anything like that. And all through that whole process, we're doing the exact same thing. If it's the heating system, we're explaining how your heating system works. I don't expect anybody to be a technician by the time we're done, but at least they could go to a party and say, hey, this is how a heating system works, and they could explain it to somebody. They don't have to technically know how it works, but they'll get the gist of it. And if they get a little basic understanding, they're a lot more comfortable with the equipment and then probably take better care of it and be able to at least stay on top of it if there's going to be any issues.
Sure. That's true.
Yeah. So we get through the basement.
Yeah.
Once we've done that, the exterior and the basement are two of the hardest areas of the house for the buyer because that's all the stuff that didn't sell them. They all got sold on what the living spaces are and how beautiful the kitchen and the bathrooms are. So we get out of the hard parts, which are your big things, the exterior and the basement.
Yeah.
And then we go into the living space and we pretty much just move systematically room by room, checking everything from all the windows, all the doors, all the outlets, light switches, appliances, sinks, tubs, toilets, drains. We're going to open and close things, make sure windows lock, they don't drop. You name it, we're going to check it just to make sure the functionality is what it's supposed to do. And if it's not, we let you know what's going on. And we'll do room by room, floor by floor. And then we finish off up in the attic. And that's where we look at the structure of the attic to make sure there's no damage. We make sure there's good ventilation up there so the place breathes. And then we are looking for energy efficiencies, as you kind of mentioned earlier, getting into, insulation on that end of things.
Got it.
And part of our educational aspect of it is talking about energy efficiency aspects of things. And that's where we talk to the clients a lot about how they can enhance their house whether it's with heating systems or cooling systems or insulation, and how there are great programs like Mass Save in Massachusetts, Rise in Rhode Island, Energize CT in Connecticut. All of them are energy efficiency programs that operate similarly, that will help boost your energy efficiencies on your house for very little money out of your pocket.
Got it. Got it. Now, I understand the mindset that your inspectors have, and they approach the inspection. What mindset do you expect your clients to have in that inspection? Are they following you throughout the whole process? Are they waiting for you to finish up and then move? What's the most efficient way for you as an inspector?
We prefer to keep the party as small as possible. So we don't, I know the buyers are always excited and they want to show their parents and their cousins. Not the time. They're there to learn. I want them pretty much, once we've gotten, that start time happens, I want them right beside me the whole way. That way I can point out to them anything that I see, even going through the living space when I'm checking windows and doors. It's good for them to see, what we're looking at, to make sure that they can see, all right, cabinet doors aren't falling off when we're opening and closing them, and that we did in fact check all your windows. And, that way, if there are any questions or anything that pops up at that point, or something unique, like I found a garbage disposal button the other day, like across the room, who would have ever found it over there? But, we found it and we got to point it out to the people and, made note of it so they would know where it is once they got into the house. I prefer to have them right there and to minimize the distractions by limiting the number of people that come with them.
That's true. So they're focused on the house and you throughout the whole process.
Yeah, measuring rooms, great. You can do that later. Worrying about who's leaving what for curtains or anything like that, that's your mom and your dad can look at those things later on too. You can do a second trip back, but this is for you to kind of learn what you're spending all your money on, how it works, and what the condition of it is.
Yeah. Now, where do you find the most findings generally as a rule in a house or when you're doing the inspection?
So, the way a home inspection is technically done, we're there to, point out and analyze the issues that aren't blatant there for you to see. And basically what that means is, if we're walking through the living space and I can see, and you can see, anybody walking through the place can see that there's peeling paint, or there's, wallpaper coming off the wall, the carpet's dirty. You should have seen that. That's something that you can pick up on. We're there to kind of go through and analyze the things that most people don't know. They don't know how heating systems work. They don't know how, air conditioners work, or, what's good or bad with waste plumbing and those things, and what to look for damage on those. So those are the things that we really kind of focus on. And the two areas, the most expensive areas that we find issues are usually the exterior and the basement. That's basement's all your equipment, heating, cooling, plumbing, all those big pieces down there all add up. And then exterior, which is your envelope, that's your roof, that's your siding, that's your windows, decks, patios, all that stuff. And all those pieces add up as well. To me, the interior spaces are all kind of cosmetic. Those are the pieces that everybody falls in love with. Those are the easiest things to take care of. It's paint, it's wallpaper, or whatever. When you're getting into heating systems and stuff like that, that's where you find your bigger issues and your bigger expenses.
Got it. This happens every time. I'm sure it happens to you too. Buyers will come to me and whisper to me, hey, they just said that is going to be gone in like 20 years, and this one's going to be gone in 3 days, and this one's going to be gone in 7 years. Could you get them to give me a price? And I'm like, no, they can't give you a price. Could you explain this price issue that we have all the time?
Correct. So at least specifically in the state of Massachusetts, in our standards of practice, we're not allowed to, I call it the 3 C's. We're not allowed to quote cost. We're not allowed to quote code. And we're not allowed to refer contractors. So those are my 3 C's, three C's. So cost, like I said, I've been a full-time home inspector for 19 years now. I haven't swung a hammer for profit in a very, very long time. So I couldn't tell you how much it's going to cost you to remodel X, Y, and Z, or I'm not a heating contractor. I don't know exactly how much it's going to cost to put in. And as you know, with any heating system, you can buy the Hyundai version or you can buy the Mercedes version.
That's right.
And they're going to cost you drastically, and you're going to have different levels of efficiencies and bells and whistles. So it's really hard to say. And even just from town to town, we get people ask us this all the time. I'm like, we work in Webster, Mass, and we work in Wellesley, Mass. A 2,000 square foot house in Webster is a whole lot cheaper than a 2,000 square foot house in Wellesley.
That's right.
And your contractor is going to charge you differently.
That's
If you hire a contractor in Wellesley, it's going to be a lot more expensive for the same job. So we stay away from cost. We're also not code enforcers. We're there for form and functionality of the house. Does it work and is it safe? Generally, if you hear a home inspector talking about safety issues, that's usually your code issues, if we're talking about things on that end. But no house meets today's code unless it was just built. So, you could have a house built 2 years ago and it's not going to meet today's standards. So you can't really base off a code. So we go off of, the time period of when it was either last renovated or built. And then contractors, we aren't supposed to refer contractors because it would be extremely easy for me to convince any of your clients that they needed to do work. And if they called my friend, he would give them a great deal. So it's kind of unethical on that end. And we adhere to all those. Not all home inspection companies, from what I understand, do adhere to those statements.
That's true.
But my guys, we stand by, we're there to do our job. We're there to be that impartial third party, just to kind of give you the, that right down the middle, what it is. And, we will try to come up with solutions like mass save. If you do have an old heating system and we know, all right, hey, you've got an old heating system, this is going to have to be replaced sooner than later. That's when we definitely throw out like the mass save program, because it at least gives them some sort of resource that will help them absorb some of that cost that they're going to encounter.
Got it. Now, whenever we think of inspections, we connect it automatically, even as a real estate agent, to buyers. But there's also the possibility for a seller to do like a pre-inspection on the house, right? Have you had that happen? What does that entail?
We have. So we've had different experiences. So pre-pandemic, if we go back a few years, buyers were doing it because it was more of sellers were doing it because it was more of a buyer's market back then. Right. And when it's more of a buyer's market, the seller wants to position their house the best way they can. And by having a pre-listing inspection, we can identify the issues that are going to pop up for a buyer. So we had that quite a bit pre-pandemic. And then once the pandemic hit, they kind of shifted into, a lot of people did it for a marketing piece, so that, hey, look, we already had a pre-listing and home inspection. You guys should feel good about waiving your home inspection. So they kind of used it that way, which we don't agree with, but they wanted to use it that way. Where I find it to have the most value is, let's say it's an estate sale. Nobody has lived in the house for a bunch of years. The parents moved off to a retirement home or whatever. You don't know the house and you don't want surprises. That's usually the best time to have a pre-listing inspection. That way, you kind of know what to expect. If you haven't lived in the house for 20 years because your parents have been there and you've been off doing your own thing, you don't know what's good, what's bad. And, sometimes it's easier to kind of have a heads up on it versus get surprised on the backside.
Got it. My first experience with you was a video you had done. We were wearing this coat. It was snowing or something. It was really cold. And you were pointing to a roof and you're saying, see, this roof is covered up with snow. So I can only tell you about this roof, what I see. There's snow on it. And everybody asked me this question. How old do you think the roof is? Are they going to get on top of the roof and do an inspection on the roof? Could you talk about roofs a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as far as going on roofs, and, it's kind of written into our standards of practice. They don't want us going on roofs unless we actually have written permission from the seller. If I just go and throw a ladder up on the side of the roof and I start walking on it and I fall through, seller's not going to be too happy. I'm going to be hurt. So it's not going to be a good deal. You don't know what is underneath the roofing material until you go up into the attic. The people that take really good care of their houses, you could have a leak around the flashing, which could rot out some of the sheathing. And if you step on the wrong thing, you could go right through it and could cause a lot of damage. So we generally will do inspections of the roofs either from the eave, which would be right where the gutters are, right at the edge on a ladder, or we'll do it using binoculars from the ground. And 20 years in, I haven't had any, knock on wood, I haven't had any roofing issues. Pretty good at telling, ages of the material. Been doing it long enough, and you look at enough houses, what's a good roof, what's not a good roof. And then we really, really make every effort we can to get into the attic to see if there is any structural issues. Because once you're in there, that's when you can see all of the sheathing, all of the framing, versus just looking at the condition of the material on the exterior. But to your point, we're also limited due to the elements. If your roof is fully covered in snow, I can't tell anything. It's just like in the wintertime, I can't run your air conditioning system. And in the summertime, we just had these, 90+ degree days, pretty hard to get your heating system to kick on it when it's 95 degrees out as well. So a lot of times you can be limited by the seasonality of things of when you're doing the inspections as well.
Right. I had one inspection in which I was so thankful that one of you guys went into the attic and kind of crawled in, looked around with his light, and there was this dark fungal material there.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, dark fungal material, I would recommend somebody else to come out. What is that all about, and how does that happen? I know the answer, but if you explain it, it's good. And that recommendation was very good because it ended up, costing about $2,000. It saved us money, and the seller was able to mitigate that situation for us.
Yeah, so that's one of the things we're doing when we're going up into attic spaces or even down in the basement. We're looking for signs of any past water intrusion, which, especially in areas that don't have a good ventilation, can lead you to have a black organic material. We're not mold experts. We're not licensed in mold sampling. So if we see anything that we question, we then refer you off to that specialist on that end. So 99% of the time, anything that we call out and say that we have a concern with, we're pretty much right, as to what it is. We know if we say you've got a black organic material, you're pretty sure you got mold. We've been trained what we're looking for. We just haven't, gotten certified in taking the air samples and all that type of stuff. So we use kind of a generic aspect on things, but that's again, part of the reason why we want to get into everything we can. Just because if we're not going into an attic or if we're not going into a crawl space, that means nobody's going into an attic or going into a crawl space because you're paying us to do it. Nobody on their own is going to crawl into a crawl space if they don't have to. I don't want to. I will. I go into them all the time, but if I didn't have to, I wouldn't. And I don't think any buyer is going to volunteer to go into their basement and start crawling around through a little hole in the wall. So it's real important to get into those places and check everything out that no one else is going to be checking out, because that's where you're going to find issues.
That's very, very true. The other thing I wanted you to talk about was radon and radon testing, and just like the threshold limits and stuff. Because that's
absolutely. So radon is kind of one of those. People have a misconception of it. It's not a constant. So it is, it's not like lead paint. You either have lead paint or you don't have lead paint. There's no in between on that. All right. Radon comes from the decomposition of uranium deposits, which may or may not be found in your soil. So higher areas of concentration are going to be areas with a lot of ledge, because you have more probability in ledge to have uranium deposits. But I believe uranium has like a 13 or a 14 step decomposition phase. And one of those, like midway through, is when it turns into radon gas. So you could test today and not have any radon, and test 5 years from now and have radon, because of where that decomposition phase falls. All right. And it's not like a blanket. So you could test your house and have none, and everybody around you has high levels, or you could be that one sole island that has all of the radon and nobody else has radon, because it all depends on the deposits, where they're located, and what level of decomposition that they're in. So the EPA actually recommends that people test, especially if you test and you don't have it, to test at least every 3 to 5 years. Or retest, I should say, just to make sure that you're staying on top of things, to make sure that it hasn't started to creep up in there. So that's kind of what happens with radon. The radon is measured in a measurement called picocuries, and the EPA set 4.0 picocuries as the real estate transaction limit. So 4.0 and up is considered excessive, 3.9 and down is considered acceptable. Statistically, they're the same number. If you got a 3.8 and a 4.0, pretty statistically the same. So, one just kind of pushes that threshold over to where a lot of times buyers and buyers agents can then request the seller to put in a mitigation system, versus it being on the buyer themselves to put it in.
Got it.
So we usually try to advise, if you're in that 2.5 to 4 and you're going to spend a lot of time in your basement, like I'm sitting down in mine right now, good idea to put a mitigation system in, so you can try to limit the amount of radon exposure there is, if there is any.
And from my understanding, all it's doing is just grabbing the air and just throwing it out.
Pretty much, yeah. So, you get air pressure that builds up. So like out in your yard, you know, whatever's in the soil can permeate through the soil and go off up into the air and dissipate. Now you stick a house sitting on top of that. When it comes up, it's going to get pushed onto the bottom of your floor. And then eventually it's going to work up into your living space through cracks and gaps and all that stuff in your flooring. And it's a heavier air gas than air. So it's going to hang out in that lower level space. So you're going to get a higher level buildup down in your basement. And as you go floor by floor, the percentage of air that goes to each floor. So like your first floor, so if you have a full basement, your first floor only pulls about 40% of the air on the first floor from the basement.
Oh, okay.
So if you had a 4 down in the basement, in theory, you would have a 1.6 up in your main living space, you know, if it's a tight, closed up building. So that would be an extremely acceptable level. So that's, you know, one reason why we also test down in the basement versus on living levels, because we want to test where it's going to hang out the most. But what the mitigation system does is it's a pipe that goes down below the floor, and it's got a big giant fan connected to it, almost like a giant bathroom fan. It's probably the easiest way to look at it. And that fan's going to cause suction and pull that air from underneath the foundation and discharge it above the roof line before it has a chance to actually push up underneath the foundation and start to build up inside. So you're just moving it from underneath and discharging it to the exterior.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about exit points of a basement. So obviously, if it's a walkout basement, you've got a slider or a door and you walk out into your grassy area or whatever it is. The other way to do it is the bulkhead. And these are entry points, the bulkhead being like more concerning for people than a walkout basement, because they seem to think it's, you know, kind of like more safer. But the bulkhead is usually where we find leaks and other things that happen. What do you see usually in that area? What do you look for?
So with bulkheads, we're looking at the condition of them. So generally a bulkhead is metal. So it's usually a cement set of stairs or a cement cutout popped down into the ground up against your foundation, and then a metal door sitting on top of it, for lack of a better explanation on them. We're always looking for the condition of the metal to make sure that it's not rotted, doesn't have gaps or holes in it. We're looking to make sure that where the metal meets the other structure, whether it's against the house or against the concrete, it's sealed up properly so water can't work its way through. And then we're also just looking at, you know, the basic aspects of the grading around there to make sure that we're not going to have anything that's going to cause you to have those issues. So you wouldn't want your bulkhead access to be at the bottom of a hill, so everything flows down there and builds up around it, because it's going to be a weak spot. We also don't want to have mulch and soil and everything built up on top of the metal, because that will just cause the metal to rot out a lot quicker than it would before. So we're looking for that, you know, perfect example of the bulkhead being fully exposed, properly painted, nicely caulked. And then, you know, we check it from the inside and the outside of it to make sure, you know, exterior, we're looking for those easy pieces. Inside, we're, you know, looking to make sure there isn't any signs of current leaks, or if there have been, you know, what type of damage has been caused from it.
Got it.
So a little tube of caulking goes a long way on a house.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. Have you got, we want to finish up. I want you to talk about how people can contact you and stuff too. But I want to find out, is there any advice you want to give to your consumers or even real estate agents that they should be thinking about when they're talking about inspections?
Just emphasizing the importance of them. Unfortunately, over the past couple of years with the pandemic, with the housing market turning into such a seller's market versus a buyer's market, so many home buyers have had to waive their home inspection, which, you know, I've never thought that a home inspection should be used as a negotiation tool. It should be a learning tool. And if there are negotiation aspects from it, great, you know, because there's surprises that you didn't know about. But it's your opportunity to have a third party expert come in and teach you about what you're purchasing. Most of the time now, especially, you're buying something way over asking price. We're up 20, 30% or more versus what it was a year ago or 2 years before that. So you're paying a lot more money for the same thing. And now you're not getting the opportunity to have somebody come in and really kind of analyze the property and teach you about what you're purchasing. So I think that, you know, making sure that people can go to it and have the home inspection, even if there's contingencies built in that, you know, unless it's 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever number people come up with for that threshold to be a trigger, you know, even if it's informational purposes only, they're learning about what they're going to have to spend money on. We've gone in and done inspections after the fact, after people have bought the house, because then they want to learn about it, which is great because they want to learn about the house. But at that point, You know, I go in there and people are like, yeah, when you come up, I'm going to show you the design I'm going to do with my kitchen. And we come out of the basement and their kitchen's no longer an option because now they have things that they're going to have to take care of in their basement, whether it's termite damage or structural damage or, you know, heating components or something like that, that they're going to have to replace that they had absolutely no idea about.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's definitely heartbreak that takes place, you know, in a lot of this stuff when people aren't, you know, aware of what they're actually purchasing.
That's very true.
And, you know, you have a house that's got structural compromised areas, doing a new kitchen doesn't make a whole lot of sense because you don't have good legs, you don't have a good house.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
How
So getting people there is important.
Yes, that's right. I think that's a really good point. Negotiation tool versus an education tool, because a lot of people approach it as a negotiation tool. I'm going to knock the seller down. I'm like, well, not anymore.
Yeah. You know, maybe in a buyer's market, you could do those things, but in a seller's market, you know, use it for the knowledge. And I don't care whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market, our inspection's the exact same. You know, we tailor it the same way. We teach people the same way. We're not trying to be deal killers. We're just there to kind of let people know what their house is, good and bad, and let them make their own decision off of the information we give them, you know, if it's within their abilities and comfort zone.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. How do people reach out to you, and your website, phone number, whatever would you like?
Excellent. Yeah, so we have 2 ways to schedule. You can call our office. The phone number is area code 339-298-1124. And we have people that answer the phone 7 days a week. So if you want to talk to somebody, you can. Half the time it's me on Sundays. And then the other option is you can go to our website, which is walshhi.com. So it's walshhi.com. And there's a little tab on there that says click here to schedule an inspection. And it brings you through the process of, you know, setting it up on your own. So some people don't want to talk to somebody. Somebody might want to schedule their inspection at 2 a.m. The scheduling system's there. It'll give you who's available. You can, you know, add your services that you want, all that information, and get everything all done right online without having to deal with anybody if you don't want to.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. This is really helpful. Hopefully it helps anybody who watches this video, and more business for you as well.
Well, hopefully it's more business for both of us. So
that's right.
Yes. And thank you very much for having me on here. This has been great.
Thank you so much, Mike. Have a great day.
Have a good one.
Thank
you.
Bye-bye.